This has to be one of the most fascinating photographs ever in Kenyan politics. On the photograph is William Samoei Ruto. You can see the arrow. And of course next to him is Jirongo, Cyrus Jirongo, who was a political bigwig and a business bigwig at the time this photograph was taken. In fact, if I can give you more details, Ruto at this point in time was Jirongo's driver. But of course he was very intelligently scheming and looking for new responsibilities and creating others in his very rapid climb up to the top. I have chosen to start my analysis today with this super fascinating photograph where we look deeply at the move by Ruto to form a Pentagon in preparation for a general election, in preparation to win a second term in office. Okay? Now, of course, most leading analysts are saying it will not work. But I believe we need to understand why it will not work. Because there are those amongst us who are getting very scared and they're sure this will work and William Samoei Ruto will get a second term in office. Karibu sana to my show today. Actually a super fascinating show. I'm sure you'll agree with me by the end of it all. More than super fascinating. Where we seek to deeply understand. Yeah, because above everything else, get understanding. Yeah? If you want to analyze correctly and predict correctly what is coming in Kenyan politics. Twende kazi. Now we need to be very careful because there are people who are going around rewriting history, modifying history, creating their own stories to replace the truth. And I'll give you the classic example of that. Now if you go to Google right now and you do a search on who the treasurer of the YK92 lobby group, which was launched by Moi and people like Jirongo, basically to distribute money to ensure that President Moi would win the presidency and actually win his very first competitive election in his entire career. Oh yes, that is a historical fact. Google and artificial intelligence will tell you the treasurer was a man called William Samoei Ruto. But that is not the truth. I was there and I brushed shoulders with some of these people. And as a matter of fact, the real treasurer, the truth and the whole truth is that the treasurer of the YK92 was a man called Sam Nyamweya. And this is how it happened. Sam Nyamweya was struggling in the clearing and forwarding. He had an office, which I visited a few times, in a building called Nyota House in downtown Nairobi. And in those days, he was pretty shabby. He used to wear those suits that look like they've been washed at home. I'm not kidding you. Until one day, people from the office of a Kisii politician called Zachary Onyonka came to him and facilitated him with a new suit, and he went to State House. You see, YK92 wanted a spread of people from different tribes in the country. And that's how Sam Nyamweya ended up as the treasurer of YK92. Anyway, why is this important? Actually, it is very scary, more than scary, when people go back and rewrite history, because you don't know what the objective is. You don't know what narrative they want to sell people. Yeah? But you can be sure it is a very dangerous narrative, which is not for the good of the people of the nation of Kenya. Okay? Now, this photograph was taken around 1991. I want us to understand why the Pentagon cannot work, will never work, the way some people are expecting it to work, to get votes for President Ruto to be re-elected for a second term. But before I do that, please allow me very briefly to introduce you to our sponsors for today's show. Lemify. Now I'm aware many of us use these services very regularly, and you'll already know about Lemify, that customers can send money to Kenya at the best rates and with zero fees, from the UK, US, European Union and Canada. But you may not be aware of other advantages, like the fact that you can send without funding the wallet. Okay? You can also send from a pay bill or a till. And of course you can receive money from Kenya at zero fees. Now if you use my code, which you can see on your screens right now, Kumekucha, you'll be able to get a cashback. £10 for the first £50 you spend. If we are talking about the UK, €15 for those in the European Union countries. And then in the US, Uncle Sam country, $20 for the first $100 you spend on Lemify. I am very grateful for their support in sponsoring this video, and so if you've not used this service, please give it a try today, because it is also yet another way of supporting this channel and the work we do. Right. The main point here of using this photograph is for us to bear in mind how far William Samoei Ruto has come from to become the President of the Republic of Kenya today. There is no denying that it is a huge achievement. Let us accept that. However, there is an even bigger problem, because the skills used, the methods used to become President of Kenya are definitely not adequate. In fact, they're useless. They cannot be used to sustain that same person in the presidency, let alone create a situation where they can achieve something within the presidency for the country. Being like Kizungu Mingi, the job of being a leader of a country, the President of the Republic of Kenya, is very, very different from the skill set used in this instance to get there, to become President of Kenya. And that is the biggest problem we have in the motherland. It is important that we grasp that. Now, there is this Ndoto ya Mchana, daydream, that has been sustained in our politics for a very long time. And it goes as follows. The state machinery, the power of the Kenyan government, is capable of sustaining anybody in the presidency. Okay? They don't need to perform. They don't need to be a good president. But as long as they get into the presidency, the state machinery is enough, more than enough, to sustain them in the presidency. That can never be true. Let us go back in history to clearly illustrate this. Now, a king and a president, who is more powerful? Who has more state machinery to work with to remain in power? Of course, it's a king. A king's word is the law. A king can wake up in the morning and say, all men who keep beards should be jailed for 2 years. And it doesn't need to go to any parliament for approval. There is no judiciary to say it is unconstitutional. The king is the law. Now, a long time ago, there was a very powerful, successful king called King Solomon. And he passed on. And his son, a man called Rehoboam, took over as the king. Now, this brand new young king, of course, inherited the state machinery of his father, the late king. King Rehoboam's word was the law. But what happened? You know, it is very important for us to understand that politics is a different ballgame. Very different. What happened to this young king? There was a problem in the way he handled complaints from the wananchi about, wait for this one, high taxes. Kumbe hii mambo ikuanza jana. If you don't believe me, read the story for yourself. You know, it would have been very simple for this young king, to reassure the people and tell them that he's going to look into taxes. And then when tempers cool, he would have done exactly what he wanted to do. But no! Kiburi, pride set in. Who are these people to challenge me? And therefore the message he sent forth to the people was that taxes were in fact going to increase. Of course, the whole idea was to get the people to fear him even more than how they feared his father, his late father. But you see, human nature never changes. It has never changed. It will never change. And what was the result of that political move? What was the result? 10 tribes out of the 12 tribes of Israel rebelled. They seceded. They went and formed their own country, which they called Israel. And the young king, na kiburi yake, was left with only 2 tribes, his own tribe of Judah and the tribe of Benjamin. And his very tiny country was called Judah. Friends, next time you hear somebody arguing about the power of state machinery in sustaining somebody, remind them of that story from history. Okay? Politics is not physics. It is not chemistry. It is not mathematics, where 2 plus 2 must be 4 and 1 plus 1 must be 2. No! Politics deals with human nature. And human nature, you touch this button, you expect humans to behave in a certain way. And therefore, please tell me, is it possible, even with a powerful Pentagon, assuming that one can be put together with the most popular tribal leaders in the country called Kenya, do you think it is possible for such a Pentagon to win a second term for President William Ruto? You tell me! And now we come to the composition of that Pentagon. The 2 gentlemen tasked with getting votes from the Mulembe Nation are Musalia Mudavadi and Moses Wetangula. Now I can already hear my brothers and sisters from Western Kenya laughing loudly. Why are they laughing? They're laughing because Mudavadi cannot win a parliamentary seat in his own home turf. Fact. Tafadhali tuambiane ukweli. If he vied for a parliamentary seat right in his home turf today, he would lose. Of course, Mudavadi was a member of the Pentagon, at a time when, in my opinion, his popularity had peaked. It was at the highest, and it has never been that high. To date, he has never recovered that kind of popularity to date. For Moses Wetangula to get votes, he would have to deal with the Tawe movement. He would have to deal with a man called George Natembeya, amongst the Bukusu, a very populous section of the Luhya nation, where, by the way, my late mother hailed from. And so this one I cannot get wrong, kwa sababu naongea na watu wa nyumbani. At least at the cost, my opinion is that Ali Hassan Joho and Amason Kingi still retain some kind of popularity. They'll be able to get a handful of votes here and there. A handful, not many. Aden Duale represents the Northeastern. That is the Pentagon. Mount Kenya, hakuna mtu. Eastern, hakuna mtu. So, maybe those who are saying this Pentagon will sweep the day, maybe they need to educate me on how exactly that will happen. You know, the Pentagon, the very powerful Pentagon of the 2007 general election, that was a very different time. And Raila Odinga then rode on the existing wave at the time. Now, what kind of wave do we have today in the year 2025 that this Pentagon can ride on? You tell me. Because in my opinion, the time for tribal politics is concluding very rapidly. It will not work. Something else very important. You see, at the end of the day, those who support this Pentagon are supporting the candidate this Pentagon is pushing. By the way, it is now clear that Raila Odinga and ODM will support the re-election of Ruto. That one is very clear. Because arrangements are being put into place. Everything is moving in that direction. It is now very clear that is the political direction of Ruto's State House. Okay? And of course, still at the top of the mind of most Kenyans is that presidential candidate. You see, we have a huge problem here. A very huge problem. Because it is impossible, currently, the way things are in the nation, for a vast majority of Kenyans to cast a vote anywhere near President Ruto, let alone directly for President Ruto, anywhere near Ruto. It is extremely difficult. Even when money is used, even if what is used, state machinery, whatever, it is very difficult. Please let us accept that reality, because it is the reality. And therefore that would cancel out any advantage a Pentagon arrangement would have of sending out tribal kingpins to collect votes from the people, to persuade their people that if you vote for this presidential candidate, we as a community will get 1, 2, 3 goodies. Okay, that's the whole idea. That will be very difficult. Very difficult. I'm sure most of you will agree with me. And then there is the other problem, which in my opinion is a major obstacle for anybody who wants to go anywhere in politics. Now on your screens right now you can see a screen grab of what happened when the broad-based government arrangement was being signed between the ODM party and the UDA party of William Samoei Ruto. Now I noticed in a very brief moment somebody threw daggers at Edwin Sifuna. You can see the way the man was dressed for this very important function. He was definitely not in it, but he had to be there because he's the Secretary General of the ODM party. What is the problem in politics when you take things so personally? I think the answer is obvious. It clouds your judgment because politics changes all the time. Your enemy today in politics will be your greatest ally when you both agree on another different issue. But when you take things personally, what you're doing is that you're constantly burning all your bridges. In politics, you don't do that. Let me give you a very good example from history. When the Second World War broke out, it was decided in the United Kingdom to form a grand coalition government that would consist of both the government and the opposition. And of course the ruling Conservatives were supposed to produce a candidate acceptable to the opposition for this government to be formed. Now the only man the Conservatives had who would be accepted by the opposition, the Conservatives themselves did not trust him. They didn't like him. They hated him. But they had no choice, because there was no way this government was going to be formed without that particular component in the deal. And of course the name of that man was Winston Churchill. You see, Bwana Churchill in the past had defected from the Conservatives to the Liberals and then back to the Conservatives. And all this time he didn't burn his bridges, obviously. And so when the time came for this crucial political decision, he had a huge advantage. And of course Churchill made his name in history, which will remain there forever, as a great leader of Britain during that great conflict of the Second World War. In politics, taking things personally is a disaster. And we have seen a lot of this taking things personally, even in the abductions, because a lot of the young people who have been abducted said something about the government or said something about the president. And of course, things did not end well with them. The late Albert Ojwang posted something, and people took it very personally, and you know what happened to him, etc., etc. That is not politics, and that will never work in politics in 1,000 years. That is not the way politics works. And so Pentagon winning the presidency for somebody? Ndoto ya mchana. Now, super fascinating. We can also apply this to the current united opposition. Many Kenyans are cracking their brains trying to figure out who will the opposition leaders agree on to be their flag bearer in the next general elections. Well, the answer is very simple. It will be most probably the person most acceptable to the majority of the other leaders in the opposition. The man who during his political career has burned the least number of bridges as they did their politics. It's as simple as that. Although of course there are other very major factors here. Because for instance, a candidate like Rigathi Gachagua is very different from all the other opposition candidates. And I think we all know why. Rigathi Gachagua has numbers. He has votes. He has influence. And sometimes that is critical. Although, in the case of Mwai Kibaki, you know Mwai Kibaki was chosen as the opposition candidate because he's the man who had burned the least number of bridges doing his politics. That is true. But Kibaki also had numbers. Yeah, so those two advantages ensured that Kibaki was the opposition candidate who removed Moise Kanu from power. That is how politics works. Now there is a lot going on in the background, in the backrooms of politics, concerning this candidate called Rigathi Gachagua. And all that information is in my latest super hot, super sensitive special report. And I want to remind you, one way of ensuring that you not only get these reports, but all other future sensitive reports from Kumekucha, including even the ones which are not on politics, like we have done one on how to survive in a dead economy, like the one we're experiencing in Kenya at the moment. Yeah? The best way of guaranteeing that is to get a golden pass. You can see details on your screens right now. For only Kenya shillings 6,333, you will never need again to pay for anything on Kumekucha. And we're coming to the end of this particular offer, so please take full advantage of it while it lasts. And of course, the first super sensitive information you're going to receive is this red hot Rigathi Gachagua special report. Why was he not arrested when he got back into the country? Why does it seem like the government has no power over Rigathi Gachagua? And yet this is the mighty Kenya government. There are some super fascinating issues and information you need to have, which is behind all this. Obviously this is not for everybody, and so the rest of us can still get this highly sensitive special report. You can see details on your screens right now. For only Kenya shillings 1,999, you can get it. And please remember to text me your email address immediately after you've made your payment. Until next time, this is Chris Kumekucha.